So I thought I would speak a little bit about resolutions, and open it up with Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, text 41, a very popular verse. Om Jnanatimurandasya Vinanjana Savakaya Chakshurunmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shanyavari Paschatya Deshatane. So the text is from the chapter entitled Contents of the Gita Summarized. Oh, before I forget, speaking of Bhagavad Gita, any first-timer, newcomers tonight? We have our Bhagavad Gita gift from Sureshwar Prabhu, right here.
First time?
Yeah.
First time? First time here. Happy New Year. No.
So the verse is Vyabhisayatmika Buddhir Ekeha Kurunandana Bahushaka Yanantascha Buddhayo Vyabhisayinam. Those who are on this path are resolute in purpose, and their aim is one. O beloved child of the Kurus, the intelligence of those who are irresolute is many-branched. And we'll read part of the commentary here by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. A strong faith that by Krishna consciousness one will be elevated to the highest perfection of life is called Vyabhisayatmika intelligence. The Chaitanya Charitamrita states, Shraddha Shabde Vishvasha Kahi Sudrida Nishchaya Krishna Bhakti Kaile Sarva Karma Krita Hoy. Faith means unflinching trust in something sublime. When one is engaged in the duties of Krishna consciousness, he need not act in relationship to the material world with obligations to family traditions, humanity, or nationality. Fruit of activities are the engagements of one's reactions from past good or bad deeds. When one is awake in Krishna consciousness, he need no longer endeavor for good results in his activities. When one is situated in Krishna consciousness, all activities are on the absolute plane, where they are no longer subject to dualities like good and bad. The highest perfection of Krishna consciousness is renunciation of the material conception of life. This state is automatically achieved by progressive Krishna consciousness. And the last paragraph I want to read is, the resolute purpose of a person in Krishna consciousness is based on knowledge. Vasudeva Sarvamiti Samahatma Sudurlabha. A person in Krishna consciousness is the rare good soul who knows perfectly that Vasudeva or Krishna is the root of all manifested causes. As by watering the root of a tree, one automatically distributes water to the leaves and branches, so by acting in Krishna consciousness, one can render the highest service to everyone, namely self, family, society, country, humanity, and so on. If Krishna is satisfied by one's actions, then everyone will be satisfied. So resolute is the translation. Those who are on this path are resolute in purpose. So resolute is just to refresh everyone's vocabulary, a firm decision to do or not to do something. And some synonyms are intention, resolve, decision. So there's another expression about New Year's resolutions. They go in one year and out the other. So what is it that helps sustain our convictions? And so we'll talk a little bit about that tonight. I thought it was interesting that Prabhupada, in that purport, in that commentary, he said that our resolute purpose is based on knowledge. And not just theoretical knowledge, That will help maybe our thinking processes or the way we view the world, but it won't necessarily be enough to give us the sort of empower us to change our habits, our lifestyle. And Krishna addresses how our determination or our convictions is thwarted, one by our association. And there's also in the second chapter, there's a line that Prabhupada often would quote, Sangat sanjayate kama, that our desires are developed according to our association. So there was one website that had some pointers about perseverance, because it's a skill. It's not something that you're just born with. And why does it seem like some people have more perseverance than others? If you want to call it, why are some people more successful than others? One time I was having a conversation with my sister, and she said, I can't remember exactly how it unfolded, but she was trying to encourage me. But she said, you go this far, but then you give up. I was like, wow, thanks for the encouragement. It was a little in the face, and they say in my face. But why do we give up? So, anyways, some of these tips for motivation or perseverance. Aesop's fables. He had one about the crow and the pitcher. There was a crow that came upon a pitcher of water, and apparently the whatever the nozzle, or what would you call it, the spout, was a little tight. So the crow was trying to get his beak down in to get some water. So he couldn't get down there, so he was frustrated. And in his frustration, he did some retrospection. And he came with the idea, I'll drop little pebbles in, and gradually the water level will rise by dropping the pebbles in. So in that verse that we read, it talks about, having spiritual intelligence. Mm-hmm. And in the analogy of the body as a chariot, we have a chariot with a driver. The reins are compared, the driver is compared to the intelligence, the reins are compared to the mind, and the five senses are compared, or the five horses are compared to our senses. And so the body is like the chariot, an analogy of the body. And if you want to get somewhere, if you have a purpose, if you have a destination, an aim, and we have this body, so how are we going to stay the course? How are we going to persevere? And it's interesting how in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is the driver, and that's representing the intelligence. So Krishna consciousness is sometimes called Buddhi Yoga, the yoga of an intelligence. So Prabhupada described again that, our resolute purpose is based on knowledge. And where is that knowledge coming from? And Krishna describes in the 15th chapter, I am seated in everyone's heart, and from me comes knowledge, remembrance, and forgetfulness. So real knowledge, substantive knowledge, is coming from God within the heart. So being able to, you could say, tap into that, is really what Krishna consciousness is all about. And initially, we may not be able to hear, you'd say, that voice within. So that Krishna manifests externally. God from within manifests externally in the form of sacred literatures and spiritual mentors. So we get good intelligence from studying revealed scripture. But the stumbling block you could say, is the filter that we have. And that's what I'd like to delve into that briefly. Because Krishna describes, or Prabhupada in another commentary in the 15th chapter, the last verse of the 15th chapter, he talks about weakness of heart. So what causes us to lose our determination, our perseverance? And Prabhupada describes that there are two weaknesses of heart. The first weakness of heart is that we desire to lord it over matter. And the second weakness of heart is that as we increase that propensity to lord it over matter, we become attached to matter and the possession of matter. So in order to achieve success in spiritual life, and the ultimate success that Krishna describes in the Bhagavad Gita, is to completely take shelter of him, to surrender to him. So in the 15th chapter, there's a nice prelude. The first 5 verses talk about surrender. And in that commentary, Prabhupada talks about the first thing one has to deal with is the delusion of pride. So this is embarrassing, but I have to say it. When I was a young whippersnapper, my legal name is Greg, and I used to, with crayon or whatever, I would write Greg the Great. And my sister used to, same sister who told me, you give up. But she was young too, I was young. And she said, nobody's gonna like you. You're so conceited. And I used to have this mantra I would chant. How come I'm so great? Yes. How come I'm so great? Yes. How come? I used to sing that, and just to annoy my sister, But this, this was part of my New Year's resolution, was like, because I mean, one of the things that's so interesting about as we progress in spiritual life, as you progress, the less you feel you're not progressing, but your idea of progression, generally in the material world, it's like a pyramid, a triangle. We're looking to rise to the top, to distinguish ourselves, to achieve success in some way. And spiritual life is just sort of the opposite. If you got a triangle like that, now invert the triangle the other way. Rather than trying to climb to the top, in spiritual life, we're trying to see ourselves not in a self-debilitating way, but we're trying to see ourselves as servant of others. That we're, like Abraham Lincoln actually said, every person I meet is somehow superior to me. So therefore I learn from everyone whom I meet. So if we had, this is a quality of a devotee, is adosha darshi. It means they're always looking for the good in others. They have an aversion to fault finding or criticism. And what is that fueled by? It's fueled by this pride or this ego, which is really the interface, the false ego. I mean, we have a real ego. We are jivera svarupoi nityara Krishna das. We are meant to offer service to others, ultimately to the Supreme Person. But this interface, so to speak, between our eternal spiritual, our fundamental nature as an eternal soul, loving servant of God, the interface into the material is this false ego. And some people call it, there's a distinction between our fundamental identity as an eternal soul and our functional identity in this world. We have a functional identity. We have a body, we have a mind. We need to work to provide for our necessities. So we do have a functional identity, in this world, but the bigger picture is I have a fundamental identity, an eternal identity. So how to align our functional identity with our fundamental identity, that is really what spiritual life is all about. It's not about denying ego, but denying false ego. This functional identity is a temporary identity. Whatever type of body we're in, whatever type of occupation, it's not our ultimate identity. So there's some description of how and what to look out for in terms of when this false ego is rising. So ego compares itself to others. That was interesting. Ego is concerned by the opinion of others and compares your success and happiness to that achieved by others. And a healthy ego, real ego, would be just measure yourself against yourself. Am I a better person than I was yesterday or a year ago or whatever? We don't have to worry so much about what other people have achieved and measure ourselves against other people. That's indicative that we're being influenced by false ego. Ego pretends to be strong. Ego sees vulnerability and failure as a weakness. I mean, men especially have that tendency, that would be the strong, the strong man. And, but it's not exclusive to men, but machoism, bravado is more typical, with men. So, yeah, and this idea of showing vulnerability. Of course, we're not necessarily vulnerable with everyone, but in our more intimate relationships, if we don't show our vulnerability, we're actually living sort of a duplicitous life. And one great Acharya or teacher in our line, actually the teacher of our founder Acharya, Srila Prabhupada, his name was Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, he says, simplicity is spiritual life. Having a simple heart, as opposed to duplicity, where your inside is not matching your outside, duplicity or duplicitous. So it's understood when we come into spiritual life, our motives are not necessarily completely pure, that we have some ulterior motive. We want either to be relieved from some distress, we want some material wealth, maybe just to satisfy our inquisitiveness, or perhaps we're actually searching for knowledge of the absolute truth. But as we progress, the service that we render is not necessarily to achieve something other than the service. And that's bhakti, the means and the end are the same in devotional life, that the goal is service. That's our eternal constitutional nature, the inherent characteristic of the soul is that we're meant to offer service to others. So when we first take up a spiritual practice, sometimes there's this idea that I will serve to achieve something else, perhaps to be respected as a spiritual person, a religious person, a pious person. And that's one of the pitfalls of developing knowledge, is that if you have especially spiritual knowledge, is that you tend to reorient your lifestyle in a way that you're not engaged in degrading activities or habits. So there's less suffering. And the problem is that the ego, we think we're better than others because we're not suffering as much as others. And so it can actually nourish our ego. We can approach spiritual life as just a means, well, I couldn't stand out in my materialistic, I tried to be whatever in the material world, that didn't work out. I wanted to stand above others. There's an expression, I can't remember how you pronounce it. It's a Native American tribe from South Dakota, the Agalalu Sioux. And they say, I chop other people's heads off so I look taller. So this is kind of the mentality of this criticism and fault finding, is that it's fueled by ego, that we don't see the good in others, we see their faults. And in that way, we prop ourselves up. And it's a very unfortunate state. And I saw in myself that this was a real problem, that I knew about God, but I didn't know God. Because to know God, you have to become humble like a blade of grass, tolerant like a tree, not looking for false prestige, and ready to offer all respect to others. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu describes it, in order to really accept within our heart deeply the transcendental sound vibration that we were just experiencing. The heart, it has to be a receptacle with those four constituents: humility, tolerance, pridelessness, and giving respect to others. So ego assumes or pretends that it knows everything. So this is not unusual when we have some higher knowledge. We want to pose ourselves as something that we're not. Like, we're missing the whole point of knowledge. The beginning of knowledge is to realize we're Anu, we're very tiny, and God is Vibhu, is very great. So someone who is actually in knowledge, I don't know if you've ever heard of Maya Angelou. She was a famous poet, writer, civil rights activist. She died a few decades ago. She says, I have learned that I still have a lot to learn. So this is indicative of someone who's actually intelligent, is that they recognize, I'm very small, I don't know so much. And ego wants to be liked by everyone. And he says, sadly, this affects most of us. And the consequences of always wanting to please others is that you never live your life as your true self. If we'll actually attract people who want to take something from us. If we are living for other people, then they'll be attracted. Yeah, I can get something from this person. But if you're being authentic, if you're being simple, you will actually gain the respect of others, rather than having to validate yourself by the appreciation of others, the adulation of others. You're satisfied. Atmarama means someone is self-satisfied. We don't need something outside of ourselves to feel good about ourselves. If we are just situated in our natural constitutional position as a loving servant of others, then we'll naturally feel good about ourselves. And ego demands respect. Just exactly counter to what Lord Chaitanya was saying. We want to offer respect to others. And what is that respect? It's based on knowledge, is that every living entity is is divine. It's a part and parcel of God. So how do we have this, namaste, we offer pranams, respect to others, that there's a divine spark within every body. Every body is a temple. And we have this marking of tilak. It's marking the body as a temple. There's a feature of God within all of everyone's heart alongside the individual soul. So anyways, just to end with some takeaways here, because this ego can be overwhelming. It can be like, wow, I thought I was, I thought I was really making progress, but the more I make progress, the more I learn I'm not as humble as I thought I was. So to persevere, Well, I think I'll just stop there because it's 6:31 and ask if anybody has a comment or a question. So I tend to, you throw too much information out there and then you walk away with, what was that all about anyways? So anyway, I think just the idea of recognizing, that we need help, we need mentors, and to rely on your own determination, you're bound to fail. We need good association. We need people around us who encourage us, who support us. And this is, it's not about just, pulling yourself up by your own bootstraps, persevere, I just gotta, we like that old song, people who need people are the luckiest people. And we need each other. We need each other to support, to encourage us when we, and if we allow ourselves to be a little vulnerable, instead of this egoistic, I'm strong, I'm tough, I can push through everything, we're just setting ourselves up for disappointment. So anyway, those are some thoughts, and it is 6:33, so I guess we should just go. Yes, Prabhu.
I think you answered my question, but just in your last remarks. So would you say the key to being resolute and determined, be in the company of people who are resolute and determined?
Yes, and also just without that ego being subdued, purified, Prabhupada said a resolute purpose is based on knowledge. So when the ego is flaring, is strong, we won't be able to hear properly. And that's the way we actually assimilate real knowledge. It's not an academic theoretical process of just reading sacred literatures and now I have knowledge. It's about when the ego is purified, then the knowledge can go through the ear into the heart. And that's where the transformation takes place. Is that when we realize that God is non-different from transcendental sound, whether it be in the form of the scriptures or the holy names of God, that and receiving that, deeply and having faith from a very deep place in the heart, because, we can intellectually understand things, but and our faith may be very conventional. It may be very superficial based on just some theoretical understanding. But the real conviction and purpose that helps us persevere through things is when we have this deep faith, shraddha. Shraddha means the heart, and dha means where you place your heart. So shraddha means where you really are. Krishna says in the 5th chapter, in Bhagavad Gita, he says, Tad buddhayas, tad atmanas, tad nishtas, tad parayanaha, gatstantya punarabritim jnana nirduta kalmasa. When your intelligence, your mind, your faith, your refuge is all fixed in the Supreme, then your doubts become cleared away and you proceed straight on the path of liberation. So our very being has to be completely absorbed. And with that ego blocking, then we can't really get the benefit of association. We may have externally put ourselves in the company of others, but if the ego is flaring, we won't really benefit from the association. So it's late. Can we speak afterwards?
Sure.
I don't want to hold up the program. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.